どうしたヤマト。
僕は
登録する。
いや、それは海賊王が言った言葉だ。
Card Kaizoku.
This video is sponsored by Card Market, Europe's largest online marketplace for trading card games. Hey, subscribe my Patreon. Thank you. So a bunch of regionals happened within the past 2 weeks in OP06, so I thought it'd be a good time to do like a OP06 meta snapshot. I'll be using my market review dashboard to do that. Just want to advertise it real quick. If you do want access to this dashboard to look at these stats yourself, you can subscribe to my Patreon as a marketeer to get access to it as long as you're a marketeer. Alright, let's jump into the tournament performances tab. I have it filtered by OP06 and then for all the regionals that happened. There's also like a Mexico regionals, I think, but I couldn't find the top 16 deck list for that tournament, so it's not in this dashboard for now. But yeah, looking at the breakdown right now for these 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 regionals here, it looks like the most popular leaders are Sakazuki and Gecko Moria. They're at 33 decks each. They share the two biggest pieces of the pie here at 29.5% each. And then after that, the next most top 16ingest leader is Katakuri at 17%, followed by Reiju at 8%, followed by Yamato at 6.3%, followed by Law at 2.7%, Enel at 2.7% as well, Perona at 1.8%, Newgate at 0.9%, Nami at 0.9%, and then Uta at 0.9%. So yeah, it's kind of a little bit as we expected. The top 3 are still the top 3, Sakazuki, Moria, and Katakuri. Surprisingly, I thought Sakazuki would be more popular than Gecko Moria, but Gecko Moria seems to be just as popular as Sakazuki. And then going off average placements, Gecko Moria seems to be doing better than Sakazuki right now. This could be a number of things, because we do know Sakazuki is getting banned in June, so it could just be that less people are playing it because they know that all the skills and matchups that they're going to build up from practicing the leader might just like go to waste in like 2 months. But that being said, I'm pretty sure like top level players will still be playing Sakazuki because he's good in the now and they don't really care about future happenings in the card game. They care about what's strong now, right? They could always relearn a new leader later. So whether that is a big factor into whether that factors into why we see Gecko Moria being played as much as Sakazuki right now in the English meta, can't really say. But just offering some possible explanations to why that might be. With that being said though, even though Gecko Moria has a higher average placement, Sakazuki has topped more than Gecko Moria at 2 tops. But to counter all that, Katakuri has 3 tops, even though he has the lower placement of the 3. But yeah, whether you're looking at it via average placements or number of top 16s or number of top 1s, these 3 distinctly make the, I would say like S tier of the meta, And then followed by that is Reiju. Reiju is a little surprising. It's a lot stronger than people initially thought. It really only has 1 set of support, and with that 1 set of support, it has been able to put pretty good results. Average placement of 9.22 and top 16 9 times in all 7 of these tournaments. That's pretty good. No top 1s though, but a few top 4s, which is nice to see. Followed by that is Yamato, next most top 16ingest leader, with the average placement of 10.37, a little lower than all the other leaders. This one is a little tricky because there are like such varied Yamato lists, right? You have the Fortress list, you have the Wano list, you have the Sky Island list. Because of that, it's kind of hard to like place Yamato in the meta. You don't know if this 10.37 is due to one playstyle of the deck bringing it down compared to the others. But regardless, all of them are good enough to make a top 16 placing deck list, at least, right? We see Yamato here and not like Purple Luffy or something, so that's got to count for something, right? Up next is Law at 6.98 average placement with only 3 Law decks that made top 16, and I think 2 of these were in Oceania. So in Australia, Law popped off, but he hasn't been having as much success in NA. One of these top 16s is in NA, I believe, and then we do see him crack like top 32. But yeah, top 16 is a little harder to do than that. And this is still surprising. I don't think Starter Deck 10 Law is even a complete deck yet. It needs EB01 before it becomes like turbo meta. So despite missing 2 key pieces in EB01 in Mr. 2, the ramp card, and then Kid and Killer, the crazy 4-cost 7k rush attacker. Despite not having those 2 cards, Law is still putting in work in this meta. I think it actually has a pretty good matchup spread against a lot of the top meta, except for one deck in particular, and that is Gecko Moria. So yeah, in my experience at least, I've had no trouble against any deck besides Gecko Moria. So because of that, because of how favorable he does into the meta, even though he doesn't have his like strongest cards available in the meta yet, he's able to top 16 right now. After that we have Enel. Enel is also someone in the EB01 waiting room, OP07 waiting room to be honest, but still able to put in results. He was strong in 05, so he can't have dropped off too much in 06, right? It was a top 2 NA Nationals deck, but we are seeing Katakuri being more favored now as the yellow premier yellow deck. But Enel does have an average placement of 10.05 with 3 decks at top 16. Yeah, just Enel cannot abuse the kind of aggro playstyle of yellow right now, where you're triggering out bodies and getting your opponent low so that you can Amaru reject. But up next after that is Perona at 2 players, 2 top 16s, average placement of 13, so not doing too hot, but still good enough to top 16. That's a lot better than you can say for a lot of other leaders. And then crazily enough, we have that one Newgate that got first place in Oceania, so it has an average placement of 1 with the play rate of 1. And then there's a Nami that got top 16. And then there's a singular Uta who got 9th at one of the tournaments. Yeah, that is the top 16s of the 7 regionals that have occurred so far. We can take a look at it by leader 2 to see what cards they run, which cards are used in all the decks, which tech choices are better. So to check that, we can look at the usage percentage here. We'll sort by usage percentage. A usage percentage of 100% means that, like, for example, in the Sakazuki category, all Sakazuki decks ran Helmeppo, and we see that all Sakazuki decks run Ama, they all run Hina, they all run Gecko, Tashigi, Sudu. So let's start looking at the usage percentages where it's not 100% to see where it gets interesting, where all the spices. So yeah, not every deck ran Borsalino. In fact, 2 of the top 16 decks did not run Borsalino. But we do see that the decks that did run Borsalino placed higher on average than the average Sakazuki placement overall, right? It placed 8th on average, while Sakazuki as a whole placed 8.27. So this could mean that there is a minuscule advantage to playing Borsalino over not playing it, due to the 2 people who didn't run Borsalino placing a little lower than average. If we look at Sabo here, 5 decks did not run Sabo. That is surprising. I thought this was like a staple card. Decks that did run Sabo on average plays higher, 7.75. I think this is definitive enough to claim that Sabo is better to run in this deck than not. 4-cost Kuzan, also 5 decks did not run this, with an average placement of 8.14. This is really close to 8.27, so this might be negligible. Ice Age, a lot of people are not running Ice Age in place of the stage variant of the deck. We do see, what is this, 9 decks that did not run Ice Age here. And then decks that did run Ice Age on average did a little worse than the Sakazuki average. So could that mean that Ice Age is not necessary? If you're running the stage variant, does that mean the stage variant is good? Potentially. We look at Great Eruption, same play rate as Ice Age, with a little bit higher placement. So Great Eruption is more important than Ice Age, but Great Eruption is going to get banned soon, in 2 months, in June. Not all decks ran the 7-cost Borsalino either. 70% of decks ran it, but they did place better on average, so 7-cost Borsalino might be a good card in the deck to keep in, not cut. Now we see the stage card. The stage card, like a third of the decks ran stage, but its average placement is lower than the overall Sakazuki average placement. So it could mean that stage Sakazuki isn't doing so hot. But 8.69 to 8.27 isn't too big of a difference. It's like a small disadvantage. And then we see more fringe cards here, like this Pudding. 5 decks ran it, but they did place pretty high on average, 7.6. So maybe Pudding is a good tech card in this meta. to consider. Gion, 4 decks ran it, but 11th average placement, so probably not as important as a 2k counter tech. The Bounce Kaido was also run in 1 deck, but average placement of 13. Interestingly, we see like Fukuro and Rosinante here. The 1 deck that did run Fukuro placed 4th, and the 1 deck that did run Rosinante placed 11th. So maybe having this Fukuro, like unKOable chump blocker, is a little useful, but with like a 1 deck sample size, probably can't make that conclusion from that, right? But something to consider. And then Tashigi and Nami are just 2Ks, but they didn't place too hot either, so just kind of random tech here. So let's take a look at Moria now. So all Moria decks run Helm Elbow, Great Eruption, Sudo, Ice Age, Sabo, and then the Thriller Bark package. So of course, let's jump to where it gets spicy. The 2 decks did not run Borsalino, and on average, decks that did run Borsalino did a little worse than the Gecko Moria average, like a 0.1 placement difference, so probably negligible. Brand New 2 is not run in every deck, but negligible placement difference. Forecast Kuzan was not run in 5 Gecko Moria decks. Has a bigger difference in average placement, so maybe Forecast Kuzan isn't needed per se. There were 13 decks that ran the 2k counter Tashigi that gives -2 cost as an activate main. The decks that did run this card placed higher on average, 6.92. I think that's pretty significant. And then one of the contentious topics of whether it's still worth it to run the Rebecca Hina combo in Gecko Moria. Well, based off my data here, the 4 decks that ran it on average placed pretty high, 6.5. That's a significant difference from the average 7.83. So it could mean that Rebecca Hina is good for Gecko Moria. Does that settle the debate? Potentially. And then we have a Rosinante here who placed 3rd in the 1 deck he was ran in. And then these are other random tech cards like Brook. Brook kind of didn't help too much, but only 1 deck ran it, so take with that what you will. Inupe 2, and then Cerberus. We'll move on to Katakuri. So Katakuri all ran 7 Mom, 0 cost counter, Yunojo, all these staples here. Let's see where it gets spicy. So not every deck ran Sanji, and the decks that did run Sanji did worse than the average, which is interesting, but I think it's a negligible difference in placement, average placement. 1 deck did not run Gidatsu 2, but decks that did run Gidatsu placed a little better. And yeah, not every deck ran Amaru. I thought it was staple, but I think this was one of the decks in the top cut regionals who did not run Amaru. Reject too. Decks that ran Reject did better than the average. We also see some people opt to run more Strusen 2k counters in their deck, but that seems to bring down the average a little bit. Onami. Half the Katakuri decks ran Onami, but it seems that Onami players play significantly lower. Maybe Onami is not necessary in Katakuri at all. This is a pretty significant drop, like 10th, 10.9th I mean, compared to 8.30, 43rd. So yeah, maybe cut Onami from your Katakuri deck, you'll place 2 placements higher on average. 8 cost Katakuri, 5 decks ran it, and it didn't really place too low. So I think 8 cost Katakuri is good as a tech card. Like, running it doesn't bring down your average placement too much. Brule, 3 decks ran it. They placed 6th on average, so Brule seems to be pretty good in this meta. Based off of this, Cracker is negligible. Hiyori, 2 Hiyori runners did 6th on average. I think maybe something to consider as well. There's one guy who ran Tropical Torment who got 2nd. I don't know what this card does, but maybe something you can look into. And then there's a Yamato user who got 4th. I actually made a Navigator series video on this, I think 2 actually, where I ran this guy's list. So shout out to Gianluca. Am I pronouncing your name right? Sorry if I'm not, but yeah. And then Sky Island package, or at least a Shura searcher, gets you 6th on average. Right, you can run just Shura to look up your Amarus and your rejects. Yeah, and that's it for Katakuri. Let's move on to Reiju. So this one probably won't have too many tech cards because there's only so many cards Reiju can run, and they all run the same cards that we see here. Where does it get spicy? Okay, 2k counter choice. Not every deck ran Miss Double Finger, but the Miss Double Finger users place better on average, 8.75 to 9.22. That is more significant than I would expect for just a 2k counter choice. And then so about, what is this, 60-70% of the people ran the pudding that makes you shuffle and redraw 5. Plays a little worse on average, so maybe pudding isn't as necessary in a Reiju deck. Queen though, Queen 8.6 to the average Reiju 9.22. Queen might be a valid option in Reiju, helps you protect against like Amaru and stuff like that, and just have another blocker out, 6k blocker, along with this Yonji. Oh, but Yonji himself ran in less than half of the Reiju decks, and the decks that did run them placed a little worse. So maybe Queen over Yonji. Gion is a 2k counter that plays worse than the average, but I don't think this means anything. You can play any 2k counter. And because 4 cost Yonji is lower, so is the 2 cost Yonji. It makes sense. They're run together. Cosette is just a 2k counter flex choice, but on average they did better. Oh no, Cosette's a blocker. Yeah, Cosette blocker in a Reiju deck seems to do a little better than the average. The 2 decks that didn't run it, chump blockers are good in the meta, I guess. Giant Gavel users, one user of Giant Gavel did 7th, better than the average. Jet Gatling worse than the average. Black Bug worse than the average. So yeah, there's Reiju. Look at Yamato. This one will be the most interesting, I believe, because there's like 3 viable Yamato builds, and then there's Yamato builds that are like hybrids that run a mixture of the build. So I expect to see a lot of tech choices here. Yeah, only 3 cards are run in each Yamato deck. Izo, Onami, and the leader itself. Here's where it gets spicy. Not every deck ran Hody, one did not. But it placed the same as the average. The 0 cost counter, one deck did not run it. It placed a little better than the average. Yori placed better than the average. Yeah, if we see this as a grouping, the Wano package, based off this data at least, Wano package seems to be the superior variation of the deck. It does better by like almost 2 placings on average. Meanwhile, we see cards like Rosinante in the Fortress variant. I guess the other variants can run it too as a chump blocker, but 12th on average, 8 cost kid, 12th on average. So yeah, Fortress Yamato seems to be doing a little worse than the aggro Wano version. Let's see if we even see the Sky Island package. We do here. Holy, Shura, and Ohm, 11th on average, so worse than the Wano version. Yeah, there's gonna be a lot of cards to go through here, so I'll just skim through it real quick. Ooh, Zoro on average does pretty well in the one deck he was running. So yeah, I think we can conclude from this data that the Wano package, Yamato is the higher placing one, the better one. In this current meta at least, it could change if like things slow down enough where you can fortress up and people can't remove your 8 cost kid easily. Because the thing is, the stage variant of Sakazuki was made to counter Gecko Moria, who runs 8 cost Gecko Moria. So kid also being 8 cost means that he like catches strays from being handled by the stage variant of Sakazuki. So yeah, I could see Yamato having a hard time against that deck. And the aggro Yamato Wano package historically does better into Sakazuki because you can rush him down. We'll move on to the 3 law decks. My favorite deck. So they all ran Otama, and then the ramp when you're less done package, 5 cost kid, of course, Reiju, of course, the power downs. Here's where it gets interesting. So Radical Beam, 2 decks ran it. They placed lower on average. Again, this is a sample size of 3 decks too, so take this with a grain of salt. The 2 decks that did run Ein did a lot better on average, 5th on average. So yeah, that settles that argument. Ein is necessary. Did you guys know in like OP04, someone called me Sim Warrior and like said my deck list was bad because I ran Ein at the time, but now like every law deck is running Ein, and look at this data, it shows that it does better on average if you run Ein. So I don't know, some of y'all got like really strong opinions without having the like tournament results to like back it up, and I don't know where that weird like confidence in your claims and like unprovoked hostility comes from. I guess haters just be hating, I guess. Blocker law on average does worse. I also found that you don't really need this blocker law. And the fact that you're a purple deck and people just assume you have this card in your deck kind of already fulfills the purpose of the law, right? They'll try to stay under 7 cards. So Queen, 1 deck ran the Queen, placed 2nd. I think Queen is good in this meta. It does help you against like the Amaru finisher from Katakuri. Round table, 11th on average, 1 guy ran it. Buenafesta, 2nd on average, so maybe a good 2k counter choice to consider. Let's take a look at Enel, 3 Enel decks. Yeah, they all run Shirahoshi, they all run Katakuri, they all run Linlin, Bej, Yamato, Enel, Hidatsu, what else? everything. Where does it get different? Okay, it gets different in the choices of 2Ks, which I don't think is a big deal. 2K counters are pretty flexible. Not all decks ran Satori though. The decks that did run Satori did a little worse than average, so maybe Satori's not even needed in NL. I guess you don't need to cheat out bodies when you want to just turtle up. You want to keep Satori's at 2K? I guess. That's the only thing I can think of. Brule runners on average did better. Momo runners. The one Momo runner did a little better than the average. I guess they could just keep putting Kikunojo and Hiyori back on top of their life. Yeah, there's NL. Not too much variation in tech choices here. We'll look at Perona, the 2 Perona decks. And they ran exactly the same cards. Okay, nothing to glean here. And then since Whitebeard, Nami, and Uta are all 1-ofs, they all run whatever the decks were in that 1-of deck. So I'll just go over them real quick if you want to look. Bad Manners Kit Course art isn't loading for some reason. And the Sanji demo deck. These images are pulling off a TCG player, so maybe their servers are down right now or something. Then we have Nami cards here. Then Uta cards, here you go. And these 2 events aren't loading for some reason. So yeah, that is the OP06 meta snapshot. Do you guys want to see like deck prices real quick? I can show that too before we close off the video. Yeah, we're in the tournament prices tab now. We see the most expensive deck is right now Gecko Moria at 441 on average for the minimum rarity. Right, I'm using the lowest, cheapest variation of each card to calculate this average price. Perona is the next most expensive at 440, but it doesn't place too hot, so I don't know. If you want to bling out for a Perona deck, it might not be worth it. But it's probably because Perona shares a lot of cards with Gecko Moria, so that's why the deck is so expensive. Law is the next most expensive at 399, and then followed by Sakazuki at 389. Sakazuki actually getting a little cheaper because a lot of his cards are lowering in price because he's gonna get banned in 2 months. So everyone's like dumping the value of the cards of Sakazuki right now. But due to Sakazuki overlapping with a lot of Gecko Moria cards, he's still propped up by that fact, so he's still nearly 400. NL at 367, this is probably just because of 8 cost Katakuri. Uta is the next most expensive at 363. Uta might get a little boost in EV01, in consistency at least. But yeah, it's probably just 8 cost Kid and Nami making up the price. And Katakuri is actually not too expensive now at 268. Due to 8 cost Katakuri not being run in the Katakuri deck anymore. In most of the decks, at least that we have in the top 16. So yeah, Katakuri is actually a more affordable option than Gecko Moria that can top. And then Yamato at 223, Newgate at 200. This was a lot lower a couple days ago, but since that Marco was revealed in OP08, a lot of the Whitebeard cards went up in price. We can look real quick since there's only one Whitebeard deck here. It'll show their deck. So yeah, 9 cost Whitebeard, I think that doubled in price. Marco went up like 50%. Ace went up 50%-ish. Yeah, you can see here this big jump. Average price of a Whitebeard deck was 138 on the 24th, and it is now 200-ish, 199. It jumped up to like 222. I think this is like right after the 08 Marco announcement, and then it has stabilized a bit since then, back down to 199. If I can get it to, yep, there you go. Get it to hover over that data point. Then we have Reiju at 145. Quite cheap actually, because all the cards for Reiju are like 99% OP06 cards. Yeah, the most expensive card is Queens if you decide to run them. You don't need to run Queen, but on the other tab it showed that on average Queen users did better. Then we have Nami as the cheapest deck here at 65, not even $100. It got 16th, so you can top with the $65 deck. And that is my OP06 meta breakdown. I'm gonna close off the video for sure this time, so hope you found that interesting. Put in a lot of work to compile these stats and present them in this way and analyze it in this way. I hope you can get something here that you can't get from other sources. That's my hope. Or else I put a lot of work into this for nothing. And yeah, I'll do like a 06 tier list soon based off this data. So be on the lookout for that. Thanks for watching. Okay, bye.
Kaizoku.